Okay, thank you folks, and that is us into audio recording, and I thank the team for setting all of this up today. We do have a quorum, and I call the meeting to order and welcome all members to the 66th meeting of the Committee for Communities. Can I remind anyone in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off. Mobile tablet devices can be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. No recordings or photographs may be taken. Can I remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate Wi-Fi connection. Please also use tablet devices discreetly and in a way which does not interfere with proceedings. I will also remind members again about the sensitivity of microphones and your screens throughout the meeting. Members, just to make you aware, broadcasting has advised that the powered speakers being used to facilitate today's meeting may be prone to interference from mobile phones. So if you could move those away from the mic and just check that they're on flight mode or whatever connection that will reduce any potential for interference. Moving on then to agenda item 1, declaration of interests. I remind members of your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. I will declare that I am taking a member's bill in relation to homelessness, and also that I own a private rented property. Any other, Andy?
Private rented property, Chair.
Any other declarations? Football? Yeah, I don't think we're overly touching on that today, so probably okay on that. But they are extensive, we know. Okay, members, thank you. Moving on then, members, to Chair's business. So, as this week is Homelessness Awareness Week, I am absolutely delighted to have our meeting here in the Skienos Centre, and I'd like to thank them for hosting us today. Today's meeting will be followed by a tour of Hosford community homes and a late lunch, so I'm hoping you can all stay on for as much of that as possible. I am a member of the PAC, and we are launching our GP report today, so I will have to get away, but I will hopefully see it again. I just would like to note as well, I think my first meeting officially as an MLA was in the Skienos Centre here, at which Sean Holland actually launched, and I was coming out of a social work role. Sean Holland launched the social work anti-poverty strategy. It's I suppose poignant that we're still addressing many of those issues today, and the connection between homelessness and poverty and all of that, but also the fact that this centre does so much work in the community and in relation to homelessness. I think it's a really, really good venue for today, and it's a centre that I've been at many times since that first meeting, and I always feel particularly welcome, and there's always something particularly significant going on any time that we tend to be here. So, thanks for that. I just want to check then, there's a draft press release about our committee meeting and visit here today. That's at page 6 of your meeting pack. Can I ask members for any comments, or are members content with that draft press release? Yep, members content, thank you. Okay, I might then maybe just come to Andy, so I'm very conscious we're in Andy's constituency. Andy, do you want to say anything in relation to the meeting today?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll just echo the comments you made at the fore there. Obviously, this facility is a fantastic facility within the heart of the East Belfast community, and it's great, obviously, to have the committee in another part of East Belfast. Obviously, we regularly are in a part of East Belfast in Parliament buildings, but it's fantastic to have the committee here and obviously have the opportunity to hear from East Belfast Mission, see the facilities that they have here in Skienos and the work that they're doing right across the East Belfast community.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's also actually a fabulous building, a set room here for it, great light, and I want to thank the communications and all of the team for all of the work that it takes to bring it here. Looking forward to today's meeting and the very important issues that are under discussion as well, obviously first and foremost. So moving to agenda item 4 then, which is our draft minutes, which are contained in your packs, members, at page 8. Do members have any edits or amendments to the draft minutes? Are members therefore content to agree the minutes of 27th of November as drafted? Yep. Thanks, members. Moving on to agenda item 5, you've been provided with a summary table there of matters arising, members, at page 23. Can I ask if members have any comments or issues you wish to draw out, to highlight or seek briefings on in relation to items 5.2 to 5.6? Members content as per the memo? Yeah. Item 5.3, members, just to flag as a response from the Minister for Infrastructure in relation to the Committee's request for pictorial signage. 5.4 is a response from the Department of Finance regarding the reform of building regulations. It would appear that proposals for reform are currently with the Executive for consideration. The correspondence goes on to add that the Department naturally recognises the link between the overall intentions to support climate action and the improved energy performance of homes. The Department welcomes from NIHE or others working in the area any better than building regulations approaches or relevant policy developments which would support the growth of the local skills base and help manage the impacts of potential building regulations uplifts. Do members have any comments or content to note? Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit concerned that the expectation is that the industry will go further than the building regulations intends. I know it's with the Executive at the moment, so we won't get access to the updates and the design standards, but my concern would be what level of EPC rating are they intending to achieve with new builds. If it's anything less than EPC A, which is helping to generate energy included, it means then that we'll be faced with a retrofit cost maybe 10 years down the line, which is, as I always say, the old adage, measure twice, cut once. It means then that it could actually double the cost of public investment into houses if we have to retrofit in the future. So if we could ask for clarification of those building regulations mean, or what EPC rating that they're heading towards, that would be useful.
Yep, members content, we seek that information. Yep, thank you.
Chair, I'm so sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
The plug doesn't seem to be working. Is the chargers working on that side?
Yep.
They are. It might just be this extension lead. Sorry to
Okay.
interrupt, Chair. I don't want my laptop to turn off.
McCaughey, I think we've an issue with charges there, McCaughey.
Sorry. It might just be this extension lead.
Okay, so we'll turn on, Sean, and hopefully that can be sorted as we move through. So item 5.5 is a response from the Minister in relation to the DWP Universal Credit Bill. If there's any comments. Item 5.7 is a briefing paper from Raise on the 2025 Housing Rights Private Rented Sector Conference, at which a couple of the committee attended roundtable discussions. So thanks to Helena and Raise for pulling that together so quickly. That was actually this day last week, I think, in this room. Yeah. So it was a very good and a very well organised conference, I have to say. I was very impressed with it. So any other comments in relation to 5.7, members? Sean, yeah.
No, she's sorry on 5.5.
Yep.
Is that okay if we go back to that? It's obviously really positive to see the PIP clauses removed, but I think it would be really useful to get more of an idea of just how Northern Ireland is going to be impacted by the Green Paper. This has been hanging over people's heads for so long. I think that it's not the fault of the department that there has been uncertainty. I think a lot of that came when the Minister in the Labour government stood at the box and changed their proposals on a whim, but it would just be useful to see just more data around that, and whether DFC will publish Northern Ireland impact assessments, if we can ask that for that information. Just data is so important on these issues, so if we could get the impact assessments for here, I think that would be really useful.
Yep, members content, we seek that.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Moving then, members, to item 5.9, which is in tabled matters arising. There's a response there from RNID regarding language deprivation in relation to the sign language bill. Do members have any comments in relation to any of that? Members content with the matters arising memo? Okay, thank you, members. Moving on then to agenda item 6, which is correspondence, and the memo for that is at page 151. So, as usual, we proceed through the correspondence in bundles, and I now intend to consider those, and if you want to draw out, highlight or seek briefings in relation to any specific item of correspondence, please indicate. I'd like to draw members' attention to a number of invitations extended to members within correspondence, and should members wish to attend any of the events, to please RSVP individually. Item 6.5 is correspondence from the Chair's Liaison Group regarding guidance for departments on delegated legislation. The change in processes and procedures for committees' consideration of delegated legislation is due to commence in January 2026. Do members have any comments they wish to make, or are we content to note that? Go ahead, Gary.
Obviously, along with yourself, Chair, I sit on that group. It's a welcome It means then that if we have any legislation coming forward from Westminster, that this committee will be given, there's a template format coming with SL1s that updates, and I think, to be honest, that'd be very welcome. I know that ministers do try to get us legislation as quickly as they can, but this puts a formal process in place to give us time to improve our scrutiny.
Yeah, although there may be challenges to the capability of the department at times to get the information, and there could be issues with that, which I have raised in CLG as well, I have to say. Okay, members, item 6.7 is correspondence from the clerk to the Committee of Finance in relation to the Department of Finance review of arm's length bodies. So, any other comments then in that group of 6.2 to 6.7? Sean?
Yeah, it would just be useful to know which ALBs are under review, or all ALBs under review, and I suppose then just will the committee be consulted before decisions are made about any kind of recommendations that might come out of that review. I was slightly concerned just around the commentary around sport NI and the minister kind of stepping into the boxing arena, I guess, boxing ring. So I don't know, just in terms of that friction between ALBs and the department, I think it would be really useful to get a wee bit of clarity on that, if possible.
Yeah,
Can I
members.
just clarify, that's DFC's ALBs?
DFC's,
rather than all?
yeah, DFC's
Okay.
ALBs. I know that there was to be reviews carried out into the ALBs in a previous, I don't know whether it was a previous mandate or whether it was the start of this mandate, but again, I don't think we've seen many outworkings of that review.
The status of those and whether or not the committee will be consulted before any changes are made?
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Anything else then, members, within 6.2 to 6.7 are content to move on to the next block, which are 6.8 to 6.12. Just to flag, item 6.10 is a Good Morning Ulster transcript in relation to an interview with the Minister on benefit, fraud and error. There does appear to be a variance between the figures that we've been told in committee in relation to this matter and what the Minister has been citing. So I think it will just, to note for now, it will be a job of work to ascertain where exactly the true figure lies in relation to that as we go forward. Item 6.12 is correspondence from the DALO in relation to the Minister's quarterly update due to take place on 22nd of January 2026. If members have any topics they wish to raise during the meeting or to flag in advance, members can raise anything they like in the meeting, but if members want to have detail on any particular issues, please inform the committee staff and they can collate that in advance. So, Pam, you're looking in there?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on 6.10 there, on that transcript around the fraud and error, I'd noticed that as well, because I didn't hear it on the day, that there was a difference in figures. So it would be good maybe to write to the Minister and ask for clarity around those figures and also clarity around the potential penalty issue as well.
Yeah.
I think, any opportunity that we have to actually bring in some extra pounds into this place would be very welcome, and I think it's right and proper that that fraud and error is actually dealt with. I think it's morally right to do so, but also to take that opportunity to see if there's more money can come back into the Northern Ireland Assembly through this work. I think that is to be welcome. So it would be good to get some maybe clarity from the department around those figures, not just some potential savings costs of making those savings in terms of the staffing resource, whatever, and also some more figures around the potential penalties
So
should
the penalties-
this not be enacted.
The penalties issue, we have already written to them to ask for that, but
Okay.
quite happy if members are content that we write and seek where the figures sit or how those tally up. So if members are content, we'll seek further clarity on that. Yeah. Thanks, members. So anything else then within that 6.8 to 6.12? Otherwise, I'm moving on to tabled correspondence papers, the memo for which is at page 9 of your tabled papers, where there are some further items of correspondence. So we're looking at items 6.14 to 6.18. 6.15, members, just before we come to yourselves, is correspondence from Motor Neuron Disease Association regarding their report into delivering accessible homes for people with MND. Do members wish to schedule a briefing for some point at a future meeting on that? Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, what we would need to do is to talk to the housing executive about the delivery plan for social homes. I believe at the moment it's 10% of all new builds are accessible, and we've heard the Minister say that not every home needs to be built to a full accessible standard. However, if we're thinking about future-proofing homes, then they need to be to an all-life standard, so that we don't have to go through so many updates and changes. Like, for instance, the Disabled Facilities Grant is there for private owners, but the amount of work that the housing executive and housing associations have to do to adapt homes is very expensive, to be honest. And if we had homes that were more suitable from the word go, we know we have an ageing community coming forward, and with that, while people are not disabled from birth, age, disability from age, limited mobility, the ability to use stairs, for instance, becomes quite limited. So I think we need to hear from the housing executive how that they're planning ahead to deliver the accessibility needs and how they're measuring that going forward, given the fact that we have an ageing population coming forward.
Okay, and would you be suggesting that we seek that information in writing in the first instance, and then we can drill into it? Would that be?
Yeah.
Members content that we do that? Yeah, I think I do understand the point, and I do agree with you that we should, to the greatest, and very often that's a minimal cost in the build phase. The retrofit can be horrendously expensive.
It's the fact that to the public purse, if you include adaptations, for instance, it could be anything from solar panels to a lift, or make it a bungalow instead. If they do that at build stage, there's not a VAT implication, but if they do it later, there is a VAT implication. We have to think about the public purse on this as well.
Yeah. Okay, members, content that we request further detail from the housing executive, and then we can decide what further briefings we need to take in relation to that, following that report or that information. Sean?
Chair, it's just about 6.15. Is it 6.15? Sorry, just to make sure.
Yeah, that's the motor neuron.
No, sorry, it's not. It's the 6.1. Oh, I've lost it. My goodness, there's the new foundations.
It's 1.6.
Thank you, found it. 6.16. It's just a short note just to welcome. I think that, yes, we're here to scrutinise, and at times we can be quite critical of what the department's doing, but in terms of something we have been calling for so long, for both the access to stability, to full holistic support packages for young people leaving care, for departments working together, is exactly what we'd wanted to see. So I just want to welcome this pilot for that new foundations initiative for care leavers. I think they're a cohort of young people. We're not surprised when they turn 18. We've known their dates of birth. They've been in the system, you know, and so to actually have support packages that'll actually help them sustain tenancies, I think is a really positive move if this works. So.
Yeah, no, I fully agree, and we often let down that cohort of people repeatedly at various key stages of their lives, so I think that coordination, so really good to see the department doing that. I was really disappointed I wasn't able to attend that. Actually, I'd have loved to have been at that. My work as a social worker, I worked in that field, and I'd have really liked to have been at it, but it's welcome that the department have taken that. Pam?
Yeah, just on the same issue, Chair, I was at the launch, and it was good to hear firsthand. I think was it Vicky, I think it was her name. You know, on that impact, and when you see those really stark figures around people who have been in care, you know, and the homeless stats around that, it is pretty horrific. So it's very welcome to see this joint executive initiative being rolled out. It's very, very welcome. So love to see more of it.
Yep, very, very good. Okay, members, then 6.18, there is a press release on Minister announcing 150,000 seasonal funding for homelessness services. This goodwill grant will fund festive dinners and small gifts for people experiencing homelessness. So I'm sure that members would agree with me that this is a very welcome announcement, particularly in light of this being Homelessness Awareness Week. I think that that small comfort of providing people a connection with other people and some company and some food is really important, particularly for that people in that situation. Okay, members. So otherwise, members content then with the memo in the table paper. Yeah. Thank you, members. So that completes that then, and we're going to then move on to agenda item 7, which is one of an SR. It's SR 2025/185, the Occupational Pensions Revaluation Order, NI 2025. So a copy of the SR is at page 293. Members, the committee considered this SL1 at our meeting on the 13th of November, when we were content for the department to proceed to make the rule. Have members any objection to the rule?
No.
No. Thank you, members. Therefore, can I formally put the question that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2025/185, the Occupational Pensions Revaluation Order, NI 2025, and has no objection to the rule, subject to the report from the Examiner of Statutory Rules. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Agenda item 8 is SR 2025/187, the State Pension Revaluation for Transitional Pensions Order, NI 2025. A copy of this SR is at page 304 of your pack, and can I remind members that the committee considered the SL1 at our meeting on the 20th of November, when we were content for the department to proceed to make this rule. Have members any objection to the rule?
No.
Can I therefore ask formally that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2025/187, the State Pension Revaluation for Transitional Pensions Order 2025, and has no objection to the rule, subject to the report from the Examiner of Statutory Rules. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 9 is SR 2025/188, the State Pension Debits and Credits Revaluation Order, NI 2025, a copy of which is at page 314. Members, the committee considered this SL1 at the meeting on the 20th of November, and we were content at that point for the department to proceed to make the rule. Do members have any objection to the rule?
No.
Can I therefore ask formally that the committee has considered SR 2025/188, the State Pension Debits and Credits Revaluation Order, NI 2025, and has no objection to the rule, subject to the report from the Examiner of Statutory Rules. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Yep. Thank you, members. Okay, members, so moving on to the main items under consideration in our committee business today, the first of which is agenda item 10, and this is community-led housing. So we're going to hear an oral briefing now and oral evidence from East Belfast Mission. The briefing paper for this agenda item is at page 321 of your meeting pack, and I'd now like to warmly welcome the following officials to the meeting: Andrew Irvine, who is Chief Executive Officer, Aidan Byrne, who is Head of Homelessness Services at East Belfast Mission, and Tom Dinnen, who is Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Hosford Community Homes Limited. So you're all very welcome, gentlemen, and I know certainly, Andrew, we've had you in front of committee before, and I've met you previously at other, and I know the great work that you're involved in here and in other places. So I now would like to invite you to make your brief opening statement, and then we'll move to questions from members. So thank you.
Chair and members, thank you. We really appreciate you. So firstly, as Chief Executive of East Belfast Mission, may I warmly and formally welcome you to the Skenos Centre. You're very, very warmly welcomed here this morning. So, Farah Fulcha G. go Skenos, you're very welcome at Skenos this morning. I want to just give you some brief background on EBM and Hosford, and then quickly lead into some of the facts around the report that we're launching today. East Belfast Mission is one of 4 inner-city missions that the Methodist Church of Ireland have on the island of Ireland. Methodism, we're basically a bunch of angry Anglicans at the start in the 18th century. And the reason that the Methodists were slightly annoyed within the Church of England at the time was the lack of social justice and the pressure that the church would actually be doing something for those who were in need. And that's very much the roots of the Methodist movement. And East Belfast Mission is very proud and lives in and works in that tradition of seeking social justice for those who have not. Part of the work we do here is homelessness. Another part is employability, and our work on tackling economic inactivity in East Belfast. We're very much involved in the work of reconciliation, which means, rather strangely, here in the middle of the Newtonards Road, you have the largest Irish language learning centre anywhere on the island of Ireland. We're in the business of community building, and I just looked briefly at that word community. Com, to be with, and unitas, oneness. East Belfast is becoming a much more diverse community in recent years and continues to be so. Because we strive to be one does not mean that we are all the same. It does not mean that we all think the same. We don't. But we do seek to include. We seek to understand those who would disagree with us or see the world differently. And where we do disagree, we endeavour to do it with grace. We endeavour to do it, I dare say, with love. And we try to disagree well where we do. That is at the heart of what the mission is around, bringing people together and building community. Moving to Hosford then, I would want to say that this is a community-led housing project, but I wanted to set that understanding of community building. And so when you look at our hostel, which is right beside us here, looking through the glass windows, the resident base in that hostel is very diverse. There are residents from both of the main traditional communities in Northern Ireland, and there are also probably around 30% of our residents at the moment are actually from newcomer communities. So Hosford is very much in the business of community building. We had traditionally been rehoming around 90 people a year from the hostel who were then ready to move into their own home. That fell away to around 20 a year. Two main reasons I think that I would cite. One is just the growing lack of social housing and that there wasn't a home for them to move to. But the other issue has been the growing quantum of private sector rents. And one can understand that if a private sector landlord who perhaps is not particularly wealthy, but as a family they've managed to own a home which they can then rent out, their motives are to find a tenant who can pay the market-going rent, find a tenant who's maybe more likely to be at work than holding parties or doing anything like that. Their first concern is their asset and looking after it. That's very different than the priorities for a community sector landlord like us. But for our people seeking to move out of the hostel, faced with 9 or 10 people interested in every house that's up for rent, they basically are never going to win that beauty parade, and so they're really excluded even from the rental market. The project that we're launching today, it's an evaluation report that we're launching today on our project with Commonweal Housing and Queen's University Belfast. And that looks at the first 5 homes that we've provided under that partnership with Commonweal Housing. It's essentially a pipeline, so we only move residents into those houses who have been residents of our hostel. It's a pipeline out of the emergency accommodation, and that is proving to be life-changing. I want to give you a quick story of one of those 5 houses. It has already had 3 tenants in it. An Iranian lady who, as she moved out of the emergency accommodation and moved into that home, allowed her to be reunited with her husband. She had come here after being persecuted as an Iranian Christian and had to leave Iran. As she was reunited with her husband, the family came together, she found work, and in fact as a family they've now moved to England. We were then able to move a second tenant into that first house, a gentleman that allowed him to have his 7-year-old son reunited with him. He gained qualifications with us here and is now in work. The current tenant, in fact, I believe is working in the Northern Ireland Civil Service. Is now working within the Civil Service. So the current tenant's a man who have moved into the house, has been able to be reunited with his daughter who has special educational needs. That's just one of the 5 houses. We've moved on from that to redevelop 240 Newtonards Road, which was our former office block just across the road from Skenos here. 6 single-bed apartments in that project, and we're now moving to, and quite advanced with the department, in an FTC application for 2.5 million, which will allow us to go out and purchase more houses to follow this model. What we are essentially doing is taking existing housing stock in East Belfast, and we're taking it out of the hands of potentially, most cases, private sector landlords, and we've discussed their motives, and moving it into community ownership, where the motive is entirely different. The motive becomes who needs the house the most. That's it. We've essentially taken a house and given it a landlord with a completely different set of priorities. and that's at the heart of what we're doing. The evaluation report is absolute gold in terms of the innovation that it demonstrates, the evidence of real impact on investment, and I heartily recommend the report to you and the lessons that are in it. I conclude by saying East Belfast Mission is keen to partner with other community organisations, to be a mentor to other community organisations who might follow us in this journey and replicate this sort of work across the region. And we're very keen to continue to partner with the department to see homes come into community ownership and to provide homes for those who have no hope of ever being able to buy one or even rent one. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and I want to just maybe reiterate, because I noticed you come in just shortly after the start, but my first meeting here was, as an MLA, was at the launch of the Social Services Poverty Approach. I was here last week for the PRS conference, which was hosted here last week, but I do always feel extremely at home here, I have to say, and feel surrounded by that sense of community and people working at a very grassroots level in a very practical way to provide support for people. You have listed there that example of the one house, those three transformational in themselves, each one transformation, not only for the individual but for the circle around those people, and how that focused support can provide the key to opening the next phase of people's lives, and I think that's really a great model in that sense. Is there, and I know there's a great variation between the three people you mentioned, but is there what you would consider a typical profile of person who comes through the doors that you see, and what type of wraparound support would you provide for people while they're within your housing model?
I'll maybe turn to Aidan as the expert. This I'm the good-looking one. He's the one that's the expert.
So we have the hostel and we have homeless prevention services here and community groups, all targeted at helping people who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness get their own home, keep their own home, and as Andrew said, be part of the community. There's really wide variety of service users. You have people fleeing domestic violence, leaving care, leaving prison, refugees, people who've been homeless for the first time, maybe a homeowner occasionally, people who've been homeless almost since adulthood with trauma going back to childhood. So very wide variety of people, wide variety of needs, and this specific project, these 5 houses reflects that. There isn't really a typical. You've got 8 households have stayed in the houses, 5 families, 3 of whom with children, 2 fathers with access to their kids, which is a real problem for housing, and 1 single mother. So, you know, those 2 fathers that Andrew spoke about, stuck at the hostel, crucial developmental age for their kids. They could have been in our hostel for literally years, and instead they're in the house and they've got access to kids over, and it's brilliant for them. And as well, when those people leave the hostel, we're then offering a room, obviously, to someone who's in desperate need, in potentially a dangerous situation. So that's another side of it as well.
Thank you. And the final one for me then, before I come to members, is around, so I'm bringing forward a members bill at the minute to require the Housing Executive to act, instead of the current statutory 28-day period, to extend that to at least 60 days. In your experience, is there benefit to engaging earlier and for people being able to engage and to moving upstream or shifting left, as some people describe it? Is earlier intervention generally more likely to succeed, in your opinion?
It is, absolutely. The 28 days just isn't enough time for us. It's obviously supply is a factor as well, and we need increased social housing and access to private rentals, but just this point, absolutely supportive of it. The longer we have, the better to help someone. So our homeless prevention services would regularly get a referral for someone who's been given a 28 days notice to leave. We have a budget to help them access a private rental. We just don't have time. We can pay their deposit, their first month's rent, so that's would be a massive help to the people we help.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to come first of all to our Deputy Chair, Cathy Mason, then I have Pam, Sean and Kelly. Thank you, Cathy.
Well, Mai, August Mai Shiv, and Gormaga for your presentation. I just trying to get I'm relatively new to the committee here, and just be good for me to get an idea around your funding model and any core funding that you receive. I know you mentioned about the grant that money that you're going to be applying for, that 2.5 million, but do you get core funding from the department, or how does that work?
We do. So, I mean, we get supporting people funding for the hostel, for the floating support model. But for this community-led housing approach, we've had Dormant Accounts Fund, we've had some funding from Nationwide, we've had various different bits of capacity building funding that have helped us get this far. And then by partnering with Commonweal, they paid for us to have a feasibility study, they gave us technical support, so we've had a lot of support from lots of different people. The converting 240 across the road was done in partnership with Urban Villages, from the Executive Office and the Council. So we've had lots of different support pulled together from lots of different areas. That's helped us make progress.
I think part of the core part of the financial model is whether it be Commonweal buying the houses and leasing them back to us, or whether it be an FTC loan, the repayments that's been made on each house are less than the housing benefit that is coming in for the tenant. That's at the core of what makes this financially sustainable.
Okay. Thanks for that. And I suppose I'm asking those questions because I'm being a bit parochial here. Like, it's fantastic, the work that's being done here. My constituency, probably a wee bit more rural, but we also have issues in the likes of Newcastle and Downpatrick, where we're seeing more and more of this homelessness happening. And I suppose an issue that we probably have, it's a very seasonal town, so there's a lot of Airbnbs, there are vacant properties and things like that as well. And you mentioned there about, acting as a mentor and things like that, you're happy to do that. How would a group approach you guys, or how would we get partnerships set up to be able to look at something like this in other areas and replicate it?
Well, I'm aware that my counterpart, Jim Dennison and Simon Community, feel the same way I do about mentoring other community organisations, and I believe it would be reasonably straightforward, perhaps hosted by the department, to bring those who have had FTC funding together to have a conversation around this, and what would it look like to fund an initial mentor group with the likes of Simon Community and East Belfast Mission providing some mentoring, and then identifying 4 or 5 community organisations regionally that could be mentored.
Brilliant.
And I think the department could play a role as host in that.
Yeah. Hopefully that's something we can look into. Thanks very much, and thanks again for your presentation.
Yeah, we'll pick up on that after the session. Thank you. And Pam, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentations. Good to be back in Skinnos today. I must have been here for your first meeting then, because that rings a bell. A very good presentation, and wonderful to hear the really good work that East Belfast Mission are doing, and very much looking forward to seeing around the facility as well. And also great to hear those stories of how well people have been settled and been able to move on, and that's really what we want to see. I suppose as constituency MLAs, we're all very aware of the crisis around housing and the homelessness issue, and the sheer volume of demand that there are on, not even just private rental sector, even just the general housing sector. Buying houses is actually incredibly competitive, and it is a real issue that we need to see solutions to. But I'm interested to know, could you tell us a bit more about how, if you're experiencing homelessness, how are you identified? How do you select, or how do people be referred to yourselves for that? Clearly very, very good assistance. And are you doing that in cooperation with NIHE? And I also wanted to ask you too around those stats. You talked about rehoming around 90 per year. What years are we talking about, and when did that drop then to just 20 per year? But clearly it's a fantastic facility. Probably people are happy enough to stay on as long as they can, but that's not what you want. You want people to move on and be able to stand on their own 2 feet and be able to help the next person. So if you could just tell us more about when that came into play in terms of the timeline, when did it drop from the 90 to the 20?
So I started working here 20 years ago, and at that point we were rehousing roughly 90 people per year. it took 70 points to get a house in the streets around East Belfast. And gradually, as the supply of social housing reduced, so did the numbers of resettlement. So it wasn't a sudden cliff edge, it just happened gradually. And over the last 5 or 6 years, that's when it's really hit home and dropped. And the consequence of that is we used to have people moving out of the hostel in about 4 or 5 months, you know, so they'd move in, we'd give them help, we'd link them in with the services Andrew spoke about. They'd maybe start working in the cafe or volunteering in our furniture shops, whatever it is they want to do. They'd find a house, and we can continue to support them when they have a house. And that's gradually broken down. So people are staying in there longer and longer. The record is 4 years. And while they're there, it's a brilliant facility. You'll see it. It's a great standard, great, wonderful sport team, great sense of community around it. But nobody should live in that situation for so long. Yeah. And then meanwhile, we are having up to 1,000 referrals per year looking for access to the hostel. So in our view, we have a great model here, but it's breaking down because of the lack of access to housing. Our project is small, it's very significant for the people we help, but really we need increased social housing to deal with this issue. And we know people are in non-standard accommodation, and the cost to the housing executive, because our hostel with support is blocked up. And I know everybody's aware of this, and we hope we're playing a small part with our community-led housing in progress in that.
I think the only comment I'd add to that is I think the mix of the type of resident is quite important to our model. So we have a carefully controlled mixture of those who have complex needs and those who don't. Aidan and his team, I'm not saying this because he's sitting beside me, Aidan and his team are wonderful. They really are extremely good at what they do, and they look after the residents superbly. They really care for them. But actually, by managing that mix of those with complex needs and those who haven't, the community itself becomes nearly self-healing. If you've got complex needs and addictions, but the neighbours in the rooms either side of you don't, that's a steadying force in itself. If everybody in the community has got complex needs, it's much, much harder to see genuine transformation for anybody.
Interesting model in that sense.
Yeah, I think it is a very, very good point. And in terms of the referral, how does that work?
Traditionally, we're a direct access hostel, so one of the few. But this year, actually, we're piloting with the housing executive, the housing solutions team, project for the past 8 months or so of facilitating people moving from non-standard into the hostel, and people who. So when we free up a room at one of our houses, somebody is moving it at non-standard. Obviously, there's cost implications in the non-standard, but also they're coming into a service where they're getting that full support and access to all that's available here.
Okay, thank you. Sian.
Yeah, and thank you, and it's lovely to be back as a former East Belfast councillor. Spent many a day in here. You've talked about some of the structural barriers that you have faced, particularly with I suppose the moving on and where that can hold up the system. But what's been the, I suppose, those financial or structural barriers that you faced in trying to scale up that kind of community-led housing, going from the hostel to moving in?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a big leap between running a hostel and then doing big business cases. And we've had a lot of support. We've been very lucky. You know, we got done with accounts fund, that took me out of a finance role and into more a development role. And then I was able to make connections with my colleagues, with people like Commonweal and the executive office. And the executive office had an economist that worked together with us on a business case. And Commonweal gave us funding to get a consultant to write a business case. And so we've learned a huge amount over the last 5 years through that. And it was essential, but it was a lucky series of events, potentially, that got us this far. And if others in the sector want to get towards Llama, you know, and the FTC loan is a very new thing compared to having your regular grant funding. And the grant funding has obviously been not grown as fast as you need it and has its issues, but it is there every year. But accessing new forms of social investment, partnerships with the private sector, accessing this FTC loan that we hope to draw down next month, that's a big learning curve for the voluntary sector.
And there's been a learning curve in the boardroom too. So for me as Chief Exec and for our Board of Trustees, we're taking on risk. And in the boardroom, the board being willing to make that move and to take on those levels of risk and make sure that they've done their due diligence and that they feel comfortable and confident with the steps they're taking. And that included setting up a subsidiary company, Hosford Community Homes Limited. So there was some governance stuff that needed to be done, which for the organisation, even at the scale of EBM, did present some moments of reflection in the boardroom. And making sure our trustees were brought along with the process. So that there was a governance piece where the organisation had to grow.
And it sounds to me that there's what you've really benefited from is not just a financial investment, it is that knowledge investment and that peer support and that learning network, I suppose. And I'm really grateful to EBM for that offer of passing that on. I think that's a really important piece, is that when you learn and you get best practice, that you are able to then pass that on. And I suppose following on from that is just really what policy outcomes or what support systems and infrastructure do you think need to be put in place by statutory organisations like the department to actually help the community and multi-sector move in the direction that you have moved in? Is there anything that can be put in place?
Yeah, so just this project with Commonweal was all about learning. So can this kind of model be done? And for us, it showed us, yes, we can do it. You've heard about the impact, and now it's led us to be able to look at FTC. But one of the great things is the research done by Queen's, which highlights in the document you have what would help the rest of the sector. The FTC is sitting there 10 million. Simon have got some, we should get some in January, and Simon, who are here today, have been a great support to us. They led the way. But what it really highlights is, and still is the case for us, if we had a little bit of capacity support, front-loading support, so you can put the staff like Tom was put into the developmental role, that would be huge help. It will remain a help for us, but it will be a huge help for the rest of the sector. And then also support around the match funding. The match funding for the FTC is 20%. That's quite a lot for homeless organisations to be able to acquire that. So any help around the match funding, any help around the capacity, and then any help around the technical support as well. There's ourselves doing this now, there's Simon Community, Extern, Max, there's a few organisations. It's a growing development, community-led housing, and we think the report shows that those measures, those policy choices would create a supportive ecosystem around it.
And thank you so much for all the work you do.
Thank you, Sean. And Melissa indicating there as well. So I'm going now to Kelly, then Morris and Melissa. But just to say, members, just to be conscious, we do have 3 presentations today and we're getting the tour. So while we could all talk about in this panel alone all day, we will have to remain conscious of time as well. So we'll come to Kelly. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you very much, folks. Good to be back here again. I've already seen next door and the work that you do and what's across the road, fantastic. But I just wanted to ask you about that managing the mix of people here. When you get involved with the housing executive, they will come to you with people who are on the top of the housing list at the moment, those people who have the highest points, which means then that the people who are direct access that you have, if you have housing executive coming in, there isn't maybe the ability to take that mix of people. But I'm very interested in seeing how that works and how that model maybe could be put back to the housing executive to look at how they utilise the points system in order to ensure that there's a mix. Has there been any discussions both ways on how that could work?
There hasn't. In terms of the housing executive placing people through the housing selection scheme in social housing, no, we haven't had those discussions. It's crucial to our project to be able to, particularly the housing, to be able to select someone who will be a good tenant and who'll fit the area and the streets. If they're a refugee, for example, the right house in the right area. So it is crucial to our model, but no, we haven't discussed it.
Because we know that they're reviewing the selection scheme, and it'd be very key to see where it works. Having spoken to through Homeless Connect to a lot of frontline workers and to people who are homeless themselves, if you're in a situation where as you said, Andrea, everyone who's in a multiple occupancy building has addiction and drug issues, then that doesn't help. It's more of the same, whereas you have that mix of people, it's a lot more successful. Yeah. Can I just ask as well, you mentioned earlier on that the housing benefit isn't enough to meet the costs that you have, and we know that the local housing rent is being frozen. Have you any asks, or have you put any asks through the department about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an issue for us, particularly an issue for, like Andrew said, getting past the board, convincing the board that you've got a model that you can reliably repay. If you are taking out loans, you can reliably repay the money is absolutely crucial. And so the model is very tight. It does add up, but we've added it up by adding in grant funding. Yeah. You know, without grant funding, it wouldn't have worked. And I think in other jurisdictions there possibly are subsidised rental models for people who are homeless. But I'm not an expert on this. I'm more on the front line. But it's certainly been an issue to, you know, particularly looking at 30 years. How can you repay us? How can you guarantee you'll get your money in to repay a loan? Is a big challenge.
Yeah, and the board were keen to understand what the exit routes were if in some time through this journey it financially stops working. So we needed to be clear with the East Belfast Mission board as to what their exit strategies were, and those are in place. So the hard reality of this is if it got to a point where it economically wasn't working, then East Belfast Mission knows what it needs to do to exit. Now, hope and pray we're never there, but we know what we need to do if we have to do it because it financially stops working.
And we know, of course, that the supporting people budget hasn't necessarily moved in tune even with keeping up with the rate of pay that's needed after years of inflation. Is there anything that you would like us to ask of a minister about, you know, improvements to something like the supporting people grant?
We would be, I mean, the supporting people have been very supportive of these housing projects. We've had some uplifts in our floating support too, which was crucial to developing it because we want people to have the houses, homes, but also to have that support as well. It's kind of a light touch, flexible support. So some of those residents, we maybe give them intense support at the beginning, but then perhaps no support for maybe a couple of years. But then if they lose the job or have a mental crisis, we dip in. So that flexibility is really brilliant. In terms of the hostel, particularly, a lack of inflationary lift with supporting people is well documented. It is, you know, potentially catastrophic if we don't get back to having a lift with inflation. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
I think if I may quickly,
Sorry,
Chair,
go ahead,
I think there's just two things. I think, firstly, I would ask the committee to commend to the Minister the overall model of community-led housing. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'd like the Minister to be encouraged to pursue models like this as a major policy decision. I think the second piece is for the Minister to be very conscious at all times of the relationship between the quantum of housing benefit versus FTC loan repayments, and to understand the relationship between those two for the community organisations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep, thank you, Andrew. Morris?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much for your presentation, gentlemen. My constituency is a large rural area with large pockets of urban sprawl. It takes in from, I suppose, from Greysteel right through to the edge of Bushmills. But the problems you have here are completely different to the problems that we face. And I was very interested in your community-led housing project. In my constituency, a lot of people have availed of the right to buy, have bought their homes, have raised their families, and when they pass on the families, because they don't want to get back to the family home, they settle somewhere else, they sell. And primarily, the purchasers are generally speculators who buy to rent back, and that house then becomes lost to the social programme. And it also has an adverse effect on the community if the wrong person gets into the right community, if I'm making sense. So I'd be very interested to hear more about your community-led housing project. And also, you said you would like to roll this out regionally, and I'd like to know how you think this programme would work in an area such as mine and others here, which is largely rural, but has got pockets of urban sprawl. Added to that, the complexity of the coastal line that we have from Castle Rock right through to Ballycastle, but it's not my constituency. Apologies. But the same problems are right across, and that is the extortionate rents and the difficulty that Indigenous population has to buy within their own community. They're forced out, and a lot of the time, large areas of Portrush, Portstewart, Castle Rock and Ballycastle are empty in the winter time.
So appreciating that our communities are very different in terms of inner city and rural, I actually think this issue of private sector speculators and investors taking what were particularly social houses is something we have in common, and I actually think this solution works equally as well on the North East Coast as it does in inner East Belfast. The basic idea that a community organisation that has the capacity to do it equips itself through the model we've talked about to try and buy those houses back. I think that works as well in your constituency as it does in this constituency. And therefore, that's why, from a sort of regional point of view, I'm very keen to promote the idea that we'll get some sort of group together. And it would not be terribly difficult to identify community organisations around Northern Ireland that would be able to do this. And I'm sure in a conversation with you, you would know of community organisations in your constituency that may be willing to partner on this. The East Belfast Mission strategy is to share hope, love and leadership. We want to give hope where there is no hope. We want to give love where there is no love, and we want to provide leadership. That's what we exist to do. So this is an area where we believe we can provide leadership.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you.
Good Morris, I was Tommy Gujimo Lisa Anish Lanare Lisa. That again?
Jazz Levsha and your missions for the real Tasha and Jazz are found. It's nice meeting with you, and I've never been in this building before, and it was a lovely building. Neil Derby to Shivsha Larn and Nini. We're being to a good Lord feeding on football, and so you've no doubt about that. You are clearly like at the very centre of the community here, in every respect. And I then just think in terms of, we'll say, the tenants, if I use that terminology for the people, we'll say, who reside in your accommodation, we'll say at present. When it comes to actually moving them on, we'll say, to other locations and so on, or assisting them in moving on to other locations, how much support do you get throughout the rest of the city here? And I'm not from the city, as you can guess. I'm West Tyrone, so I do think in terms of, we'll say, support, we'll say, from other organisations that would facilitate then those same people being integrated into whatever community it is that you would find accommodation for them.
Yeah, it's a really good question. A lot of the people who stay with us will move into housing in East Belfast somewhere. Quite a lot, the majority. Housing is still, even though it's really inaccessible for us, it's more accessible in certain other parts of the city. But we do have people who move to different parts of the city and sometimes out of Belfast as well. And we have a Supporting People funded tenancy support worker who sticks with the person pretty much for as long as they need it, to make sure they get embedded in that area. So we have the same model, except we look for an organisation similar to us in their local area and try to get them involved with that. Some people will keep coming back. They live in West Belfast and they still will come over, volunteer in the cafe, go to the women's group. Other people will just create a new life in whichever area they've moved to. But there are similar organisations to us, obviously, across the city, and we just link in with them, work with them.
Okay,
Cormagan, Melissa, brief one, Kelly?
Just a very quick one. The success of here is that you don't have the local community very opposed to what's here. What would your advice be to other communities where homelessness is something that needs to be addressed? How can they ensure that a facility such as Hosford wouldn't fall foul of NIMBYism, not in my backyardism?
Probably best on that, Aidan.
It's a tricky one, but just keep talking to people, be very open. We're very open about what we do, and because we are embedded in this community, you know, there are many people in many streets who've been supported by our floating support team, have helped me get a job through the employability, have got a hamper through the Christmas hamper scheme, all sorts of that. We've got so many links throughout this community that we would meet and we would talk to people.
And I think from my point of view, you know, we sit here today at a juncture which is 200 years into the story of Methodists on this site. You know, for 200 years, we're just writing the latest chapter at the minute. So there's a high degree of trust in the community around the mission. Most people are aware of, at some point, with their family connected with the mission for help, whether it be food or energy or whatever it was, but there's a degree of trust there. That said, we very proactively work on our relationships. Those who potentially would be challenging do feel able to come to us. Now and again, they use social media and just, you know, but generally speaking, they feel able to come to us and have a conversation if they have a problem, and they do from time to time and come in and, you know, there are forthright conversations over a cup of coffee in my office occasionally. I have to say that Andy Allen here, Andy has been brilliant at times in terms of hosting some local conversations. So as we moved to the 240 project, some of the residents in the streets immediately around 240 had concerns, and they were genuine concerns. Now, we were able to address them, but they were genuine worries, and Andy hosted a meeting for us. So also using local elected representatives has been an important part of that relationship.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic, really thought-provoking, I have to say, and that final point, what stands out to me there is leadership, leading within your community. It also stands out to me the benefit that the department and anyone else working in this sector of reaching out and partnering with those groups who have the track record within the communities and the confidence of communities and proactively seeking those out. Some of the other things that occurred to me as we were going through the session was around, there's working on around vacant premises, and to me it would be crucial that organisations like yourselves with this model would get your fair share of access to that, and also the work that's going on around public land and a review of public land, that you could be supported in a targeted way around initiatives like that. And I would love to see a proper cost-benefit analysis done of this model versus the more traditional model. And I was really struck when you talked about that kind of peer support within the sector, and that concept of Paulo Freire, as he talked about all teach, all learn. And not only are people benefiting, the people who are being mentored, but the people who are mentoring are learning, and the capacity is being built. So you're not seeing this repeated people set up to fail, revolving door in justice or whatever. People are genuinely getting that small bit of support, targeted, person-centred support that gets them to another level of capacity and allows them to move on and get over whatever that particular difficulty may have been in their lives. I think it's really good, and I think there's much more could be done across the entire north by looking at this type of model. I think it's really, really reactive. I want to thank you for the invitation here and for hosting us today, Andrew. Really, really appreciate that. I think it's been a fantastic venue, and also to thank you for the ongoing work that the East Belfast Mission is doing in this community, and that pioneering of ways of working that I think have huge benefit.
Well, I would like to say a huge thank you to the committee and take the opportunity to wish you all a very Merry Christmas. So, Gura Mila Mayogov. Just taking a mental break. No light showing it down. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members. I wonder whether to take further actions now or move to the panel and then take them all at the end.
either. We're not particularly behind. We're right on time.
So I'll just touch on if there's any
Actions
follow.
from this one.
Yeah, any actions from this one then that members want to flag up. I know Kathy had raised something there that she wanted to.
Just that point around linking the regional, no Morris raised it as well, linking that kind of regional approach or communicating with the department to see have they any plans to do this, or is this something that we could look into or delve into further?
Yeah. Thank you. One that I want to suggest was in relation to that direct ask there around flagging to the department our support for this type of model. In terms of our role of advising the department, would members be content that we reflect the support that we have towards what we've heard this morning?
I think the request was to commend the community housing model to the
Well,
Minister.
I'd be absolutely comfortable.
Are members happy with that?
Yes.
Could we go a wee bit further? Just, I know that the Minister has been looking at alternative like the interim rent, is to actually see has the department looked at the community-led housing model as another arm to that sort of mix of solutions? Because it might be something there that if he brings it in, as was said, into a policy piece, then we think it's great. It obviously appears to be working within the community, but will the Minister actually consider it and bring the model in-house to see if that's a supported model like interim rent and co-ownership and all of the other options?
And could it be rolled out as a model to other areas and to other communities?
The other thing I wanted to ask there is on the derelict buildings, the Minister has been very supportive of the fact that he's looking for any land that becomes available, but I'm wondering if we could ask the Minister on that basis if there's any buildings that become available that could be used through asset transfer for something like this, then is that something that he could also push the rest of his executive colleagues for? Because if there are any public buildings that could be used for residential purposes, transferred, maybe if he could push that as well.
Yeah, members could add. I think that's, in a housing crisis, I think there's huge potential merit there. Sian?
Yeah, I just want to add then, when we're writing to the Minister, perhaps we could make the case around that match funding for SPC at 20% for particularly homeless charities who don't have that, who might not have access to that disposable income or access to grants and things like that for that match funding. And then I'm sure that we'll hear it later on, but it's also just around the lack of inflationary uplift is supporting people, and just
Our support for that.
yeah,
I'm
our support.
content with both of those from Sian.
Just Chair, very briefly, I'd like to hear the Minister and the Department's thoughts on the buyback for social housing.
Yeah, members content with that suggestion as well. Okay, members, thank you. Really good session there, and looking forward now to the next one as well. So we're moving to agenda item 11, and this is future of the Supporting People programme. We're hearing oral evidence today from committee representing independent supporting people providers, known as CRISP. So the briefing paper, members, for the agenda item is at page 325 of your pack. So if I could now ask the officials then who are in the gallery, I believe all, so Kate Martin, who is CEO of Max. Kate, could you please come on ahead up? Jackie McCaughey, who is Area Manager for Housing Support at Mindwise. We have Deirdre Walker, who is Executive Director of Supported Living at Apex Housing Association, and Kevin Wright. And Kevin is CEO of First Housing Aid and Support Services, FHASS. So I think, Kevin, it's yourself that is going to make some opening remarks, if I'm correct, and then we'll move to questions from members. So to Fáilte Rómhaigh, all very welcome, and thank you for attending the meeting this morning. So go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you. I want to thank the committee for inviting us today. The four of us are members of CRISP. It's a bit of a mouthful. A committee representing supporting people funded organisations. A bit of context, you probably know a good deal about supporting people, but set up in 2003, administered by the Housing Executive on behalf of the Department for Communities. Programme sees grant funding awarded to providers who are mainly in the voluntary sector to deliver housing-related support. In 2024, the programme funded an estimated 4,000 staff in 800 separate projects with 80 providers providing services to more than 20,000 people. We all know the enormous difference that supporting people makes. In my time at First Housing, we've supported tens of thousands of people, most either homeless or at risk of experiencing homelessness. As a recent Public Accounts Committee hearing, the outgoing Permanent Secretary of the Department of Communities, Colin Boyle, described the impact of supporting people as incredible. The Minister for Communities described the programme as fantastic, and we know that to be true. However, we're here today to make clear that many of these incredible and fantastic services are struggling due to the impact of persistent underfunding going on more than a decade now. The core of the problem has been the failure of the Northern Ireland Executive collectively to ensure that the level of funding provided to the programme keeps pace with inflation. In the decade since 2013, there's only been 2 increases. A below-inflation increase in 2022, which was at the height of the cost of living crisis, and then in 2024, an above-inflation increase, which we welcomed. It was a first step to addressing the damage that has been caused by the persistent failure to increase funding in line with inflation. However, this year, 2025-26, we've had no inflationary uplift or any additional funding to deal with the 5.5 million in additional costs imposed by the UK government's budgetary changes, particularly the minimum wage, the employer's national insurance contributions. Those 2 changes effectively wiped out the positive impact of the increase in 2024. For so many years, supporting people funding providers have had to deal with the fallout of what are effectively real-term cuts. We've watched as other public services get year-on-year inflationary increases while we've had our funding frozen. The real-term cuts have led to ongoing recruitment and retention crisis in many of our organisations. So many supporting people projects have lost staff to the public sector where pay and pensions are far better. Some of us have lost staff to supermarkets that are now paying better than we are. The reality is that many providers are at tipping points. It's true that not every provider is the same. There's lots of variables, so different size, geography, type. But what we can say, without any fear of contradiction now, is that many of these services are struggling to make sums add up. We can say more about our individual situations during questions, but I know many providers are considering whether it's time to call it a day on particular services, despite knowing the impact this would have on the people who depend on those services and on the increased pressure on statutory services that would follow. Providers don't want to close services. However, the constant failure to properly fund are coming home to roost. Before we take questions, I want to make a request to the committee today. You will know that the Northern Ireland Executive is due to consider a multi-year budget and that a draft is expected within the coming weeks. On behalf of CRISP, I would ask that you write to the Executive Ministers to call on them to ensure that Supporting People programme receives at least inflationary uplifts in funding over the next 3 years. Without such an increase, the sustainability of several Supporting People funding organisations is going to come into question. We need the Northern Ireland Executive collectively to show they value supporting people, not merely in words, but in resources. Thank you. We're happy to take questions.
Thank you, Kevin, and I would like to acknowledge the very significant work that all of you do. It is really important work, and this flows on nicely from the previous session that we had. I suppose, given the focus on homelessness, and I know a lot of your work will be in relation to that, what changes would you like to see? And you've mentioned the funding, and we take note of that, but what changes, perhaps other than that, would you like to see to current homelessness support system? And do you think enough emphasis is being placed on prevention of homelessness?
I mean, I think that the simple message here is that if we have sufficient funds to do the job will get done. It's just becoming impossible year on year. They call the funding frozen, but that's another word for a cut if inflation is continuing to go up year on year. The impact on my organisation with the Employers' National Insurance was to add 180,000 to the budget, and we have no way of making that money, so we've lost 4 staff as a result. Over the years, we've lost 19 staff. It's becoming harder and harder just to keep the services alive on the ground. I think most of what we do is prevention. Our services, there's 8 accommodation projects and 10 supporting people services. You'd be surprised at the number of phone calls I get from the police asking us to go and attend to some young person who's causing a disruption in the middle of Derry because they've been using drugs or whatever. And they phone us to go there and see what we can do, because the next step is to arrest them. Pretty often we can prevent the arrest and what follows in terms of the criminal record, the cost to the statutory services of what follows that. So I think most of what we do is already prevention.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to come to Kelly then. Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you very much, folks. I think it's important, I understand what supporting people is, but I think it's important that the committee understands what supporting people is. It's about supporting people, and you need people to do that. And that's why the costs into supporting your staff is key on this. I believe there's around about 4,000 people employed across all of supporting people. But realistically, how many people are actually working in supporting people? There's those that are employed. How many more is that grant funding actually helping to be within that, in your sector, to help people?
Impossible to say. I would not have a clue. We know from the statistics that we get from within the Northern Ireland Housing Executive that there are 4,000 paid staff.
Yeah.
I mean, beyond that, we've got maybe 30 or 40 volunteers involved in one way or another. I'm sure my colleagues would have.
In terms of staffing for ourselves in supported living in Apex Housing Association, we would have just over 450 staff that do provide a very, very valuable service, you know, in maintaining people independently in the communities that they want to be living in.
Okay. And above that, is there any other staff there, volunteers and others that are then enabled because you have that?
There would have been more volunteers historically, but I think it's just the generation that is coming along now. You know, even in terms of families, you know, you do not have the family support that you would have had, or the volunteer support you have. So it's mainly just down to our staff.
Okay. I asked a question of the Minister a while ago, and it was about adverse incidents and how many adverse incidents happens with your frontline staff. And having met some of the people, I to be honest, my hat is off to the work that they do. Do you think that the lack of support coming through from supporting people because the incremental uplifts haven't been coming through has actually led to a reduction in staff available on the ground and maybe an increase in adverse incidents happening? Have you any thoughts on that?
I think there's a bit of a mix there in relation to, it's not just quite as simple as that, in that, you know, I suppose I obviously work in the young people sector, and I suppose we see an increased complexity of the young people that we're supporting, so you have to take that into a factor. I think that by default, the fact that when the Supporting People programme was first launched, salaries, recruited social workers, graduates that were trained, and you know, over the last how many years it's changed. You know, you're now talking about, sorry, had the cold, so I'm a bit scratchy. You're now at a point where you are looking at minimum wage as a starting salary for a role that is not a minimum wage role at any level. It's a skilled job, and I think that's a kind of key factor in relation to kind of where it's coming in. I think in relation to increase in incidents, I mean, you could weigh that up and say maybe, but on the other side of it as well, I think that we have also been asked to increase our reporting of incidences to supporting people as well, so you might actually balance that off a wee bit too with that as well. So
but I think it's very key for me, what I'm hearing from you is that we have more and more complex people who are presenting to your services, but we're not investing in the services as we used to do on the level of expertise that is needed. No. So what our objectives is to hopefully not have very vulnerable people on the streets, but actually we're not investing enough to give them. I'm sure your people are absolutely fantastic, but you know what I mean. It's we're not giving them the same level of expertise in those jobs as was in the past.
I think what you're finding is it's the retention issue as well. So staff will come in, they're trained, they're very, very skilled, and they can basically move into the, as Kevin was saying, into the public sector and earn significantly more money. And I don't know how we compete with that. And I think this is where I feel very strongly about today, is understanding that this is the crisis, is whether if we do not have staff to deliver services, we're not going to be able to deliver services, and staff are not going to continue to work for minimum wage. They're not going to. I mean, and again, the minimum wage is going up again. So I think it's an insult to them that this is what we're saying, that the housing sector is worth. You know, you work as a support worker in housing, but you're not anywhere near as valuable as somebody who works in health or in anything else. And I don't know how we address that, because it's as Kevin said, the gap has been there for so long, it's been frozen for so long, that actually we need a significant jump to make those jobs actually attractive for people to want to work in them, and to give the right support then to the people that we work with.
Yeah. One of the questions I suppose I'm interested in is, if your services weren't there, how much would it cost government to fulfil that role? And it's a bit like domiciliary care workers, you know, and all different people, you know, that are on that minimum wage. If you weren't there, it would cost health, it would cost education, it would cost everybody else so much more. Have you any figures or ever looked at that calculation?
There's such a wide variety, because supporting people doesn't just cover homelessness. There's older people's services, there's young people's services, mental health, learning disability. There's such a wide variety, and the complex cases now. You know, when I first came into work in supporting people's services, most of our clients within the mental health sector were being discharged from hospital, very low needs. You know, maybe visited hospital once a year after that. The cases now, that's those co-occurring. You have mental health, you have drug and alcohol addiction, so the cases are becoming more complex. The clients that we support are more complex, and one appointment now with anybody in a hospital sector is £220 just for a half-hour appointment. So if you multiply that by the number of clients we have, it works out very, very high, hundreds of thousands of pounds in each service. If you count, you know, we had a client, for example, who would have had over 600 visits to A&E in 1 year, and that person now goes to A&E once a month, possibly twice, on a really bad month. And the amount of money that has reduced. And as an organisation, Mindwise's statement is mental health is everyone's business, but housing is everyone's business. So it shouldn't just be the Communities Committee and the Community Department that are looking at housing. It needs to be right across every sector, because the amount of money that is saved via the Supporting People programme, not just within communities, but also then within health, within education, within justice, it mounts up so much right across the sector. So housing needs to be every department. So it does.
My final question, I noticed in your paper that you've said here that we're now coming up to Q3, and the budget allocation for this year still hasn't been confirmed yet. Is that still the case, or have you had word yet?
I think we've had it confirmed as far as we know.
Okay,
that,
okay.
it's not
But
gonna
this
get
late in the
anything
year,
else.
I'm just wondering, in a year when the Department for Communities in particular has taken forward the Fair Funding Programme through the partnership agreement with the community and voluntary sector, it's a bit rich, you know, that funding arrangements are made so late in the year.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's an ongoing difficulty. I mean, one of the reasons we've let 4 staff go is because we know the minimum wage is going to go up again on the 1st of April next year, and we also know we're not going to get any funding decisions until usually June, July, August. So in terms of your value for money question, they did do a 3 or 4 years ago now, they did a survey, and they found that for every £1 spent on supporting people, the equivalent would be about £12 in statutory services.
My goodness, that's some return on investment there, you know, the savings that are being achieved. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
And we do frequently hear about invest to save, and I agree with you, investing in these types of services would save the entire system, many multiples of what the investment is. Just in relation to the overall budget, so this year's budget is 80.69. Would you have a figure of what that would be had it kept pace with inflation? Do you have any understanding of how far behind the curve you are in that respect? And you can send information through to us if that's possible to assess that. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think it's an important consideration.
I know part of the conversation we had earlier today was around that it's potentially been around a 7% inflation over the time of the Supporting People programme, but actually at a minimum it should have been over 30. So that's, if you calculate the figures around that there, that's where it should be sitting now, is 30% higher than what it's actually sitting at. Yeah. If you'd gone, and that's probably an estimation and around the rate of inflation.
Okay. Okay, well listen, thank you. Important session as well, and some very key messages coming from yourselves that we will certainly reflect upon, and it will be of use to us moving forward. Again, very, very crucial in relation to this particular week and the work we're doing, so I want to thank you all for attending the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, members, so thank you then. Any actions arising out of that, members? Kelly?
Yeah, can we write to the Minister to support him to have an uplift in supporting people, and for that uplift to be consistent over the multi-year budget period?
Members content?
Yeah.
Yes, content, Chair, although I do note that, as was raised in the briefing, that a bid had been made to the Executive, which was turned down by Finance in relation to that budget. So it is a huge issue, and I take on point absolutely the witnesses talking about housing is everyone's problem. Absolutely is. It's not, solely down to this department, and we know that, so there's not going to impact. So I'm absolutely happy to write on that particular issue, but it's interesting to read there that the request was made, but that wasn't granted, which is very disappointing. But we know how.
Should we then extend that letter to Minister of Finance and the whole Executive then to say that this programme is saving the rest of them a fortune? So if they don't invest, they'll have to pay more.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you're with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that point that it shouldn't just be the Communities Committee looking at this, and if you look at all of the other departments that would have had to spend that money, I think that would kind of justify writing to the whole Executive.
Yep. And that's in relation to the request around inflationary uplift.
Well, as we heard, if they haven't had the appropriate uplifts for years, if we could invest to get the base rate up and then the inflationary uplift, but that might be a bit too much to ask. But
I think at a minimum we should emphasise that we're calling for them to receive that at least inflationary and across the 3-year budget.
And if we could remind them they've just signed off on a partnership agreement with the community and voluntary sector, so whatever they're giving their uplifts to every other commercial operator or departments to work for, they're supposed to be doing the same for the community and voluntary sector. I appreciate that the employers' national insurance came after the last budget was set, but they know about it now, so it's time to put their foot in the pedal and make sure that that's sorted out. Fair funding agreements are fair funding agreements.
Thank you, Shelley Morris.
There's just the last paragraph in their written submission when they recommend that we meet representatives from the 4 thematic groups. Maybe give us a better picture or a more overall picture of how the sector actually is in dire straits and needs more money and more investment. So I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there, if the committee feel it would be valuable or not. Just flagging it, that's all.
Would maybe suggest maybe we'd ask them to provide us with a written update in relation to the specific, each of the specific ones. Might be a first step in that regard, Morris, if you'd be members content with that.
Yep.
At least we'll have that information directly from each of them. Clerk, are you content with?
Yep. And are we asking each of them to outline the impact that the funding model is having on what they can and want to provide?
Well, I think they're what it is they're providing, their overall situation, and any impacts that any. I think that'll be a kind of a look specifically at each of them.
The impact the funding situation is having on their ability to sustain their support services.
Yeah. And what they're not able to do. Yeah.
Members content with that. Okay, members, thank you, and we are going to move then to agenda item 12. So this is a Childhood Adversity and Homelessness report, and we're taking oral evidence then this morning from the Simon community. So the briefing paper for the agenda item is at page 328 of your meeting pack, members, and I now welcome and call forward to the table here the following officials. So we have Jim Dennison, who is Chief Executive Officer of the Simon community, and Karen McAllister, who is Head of Impact and Innovation in the Simon community. And just before I go back to the panel, I probably should have declared interest as being a member of the PSE, and we are currently looking at a report in relation to homelessness, and we actually met with heard evidence from Jim last week, so I'll just include that as an additional interest. Jim, delighted to have you here today, and we're all keenly aware of the very important work that Simon do and the contribution that you make throughout many parts of the north indeed. But I would like to ask you to make a few opening remarks, and then we'll come to questions from members, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. It's nice to be here. So today's focus is on this document and everything that it says in it. So it's Childhood Adversity and Homelessness in Northern Ireland. Something that I know some of you will have taken a particular interest, and in particular Kelly, who spoke at our launch event, so thank you for that. This is a groundbreaking, unique and economically robust piece of research. It clearly demonstrates the link between adversity in childhood and homelessness in later life. It proves something that we knew through our many years of working with people who are homeless or become homeless, that homelessness doesn't just happen to people after a particular event. It tends to be a number of events that happen over a period of time, and we can see that. Typically, it happens to young people who have been born into circumstances beyond their control, where they're neglected, they're unloved, they're unwanted, they become uneducated, they live in areas of extreme poverty or deprivation, they make bad decisions at certain times, which puts them in places that no young people should ever be. And we can see that that is a roadmap. And unfortunately, we tend to come across these individuals at the point in which they become homeless, where our whole view is, if you're serious about ending homelessness, you need to get in much earlier intervention and prevention. Mm-hmm. I'm delighted that the research author is here with me today, my colleague Karen McAllister, soon to be Dr. Karen McAllister, who studied as part of her PhD. He's here getting embarrassed when I say that, under Queen's, over the supervision of Queen's University Belfast. And this research essentially does a number of things. It challenges assumptions around why we believe people become homeless. It demonstrates that homelessness needs a multifaceted approach. It's not just a housing issue, and it shows that we need that early intervention and not just dealing with people who are on the cusp of homelessness. I'm also pleased because she's a subject matter and I'm not, so she'll be able to take a lot of questions and I'll help and support where I can. Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy, Chair, to take questions, or would you like me to provide a quick overview of the key findings?
Yeah, could you just give us, please, a quick overview?
Okay, that's brilliant. So this research was done in partnership with 10 other homeless organisations across Northern Ireland. We engaged with 175 adults living across Northern Ireland, so not just in Simon Community Services, but as I said, with 10 other homeless providers to get that picture of experiences. What we found was that, as Jim has said, homelessness did not begin in adulthood. Homelessness began in childhood. Childhood adversities for this population was exceptionally high. The 3 top adversities, childhood adversities, and that's things that happen under the age of 18, was parental death or separation, was emotional neglect, and collective violence. Collective violence relates specifically to our history in Northern Ireland. That is violence that is attached to the Troubles, so police, paramilitary, army violence. So that featured as number 3 with the people in our hostels. The other thing that we found was that the amount of adversity. So when we talk about adversity, we talk about 4 or more indicators, 4 or more adverse experiences. That is the tipping point in relation to poor outcomes. Our homeless population, 2/3 had experienced 4 or more experiences, compared to 18% of Northern Ireland's population, so 4 times more. What was exceptionally fascinating about this research, Queen's University, Colin Walsh did a same study with the Northern Ireland general population. Okay, so they carried it out with the general population, and we did it in homelessness services. And what we found was that people experienced homelessness, experienced the same type of childhood adversity. So where it peaked in the general population, it peaked in homelessness services. It mirrored exactly. But what the difference was, it was the extent. So what does that tell us? That tells us that in Northern Ireland, the adversity that our people experience, the childhood adversity that our people experience, is place-based. It's very specifically related to how we operate as a society, how we're governed, how we make decisions. And for us, what that demonstrated is that people experiencing homelessness are no different. Their lifetime experiences are no different, but they experience adversity, trauma, violence, a range of abuse at a way higher level. And if we're going to do something about this, we have to look at it as a society. But we have to remember that actually coming to the table today, there are not enough houses in Northern Ireland, and actually it's the people with the most adversity that don't get the houses that are in temporary accommodation. So the key findings from this part of the report is prevention is key. And Chair, as a social worker myself, we need to think about early intervention. We need to talk to our colleagues in health, in education, and work out at a universal level what are they doing that helps us in this space. We need to then commend things like new foundations, Housing First for Youth, that actually shows systemic change. And then we need to look at our other things like Complex Lives that help people in crisis. So what this does is gives us an evidence base in Northern Ireland about our people who are experiencing homelessness. And with this evidence base, I believe we can make data-led decisions that will change people's lives. Thank you.
And not only change people's lives, so importantly, but change the trajectory of cost and outcomes and all of that more widely across society. I think that's absolutely vital. Very, very interesting, President, very interesting correlations between the adverse incidents, and it actually flags up something in terms of PAC, that the need for cross-departmental working, the need for better data and the use of data which is being deployed by all the departments together, and that's really important element of it. I know you've emphasised there several times around the early intervention, and you are aware, I'm sure, that I'm developing a members' bill on increasing the statutory time period from 28 days to at least 60 days. Can you flesh out why you think early intervention is beneficial and how that can help?
I mean, I think we can take it from a number of levels. I think if we start at the very early intervention in relation to in childhood, we need to be identifying children and young people who are at risk. And early intervention does not even prevent homelessness. It prevents spiralling addiction. It prevents mental health issues. It prevents all those factors. So we should not only see it as homeless prevention, it's about protecting the next generation so they don't find themselves in holes of exclusion that we're dealing with now. The second thing that prevention will do, it will identify groups that we have evidenced and other people have, but we have evidenced that are vulnerable to homelessness. Young people leaving care. 1 in 5 adults in temporary accommodation have been in care. That's not the rest of the homeless population, that's just those sitting in hostels. We also know 1 in 3 have been in prison. We also know mental health is a significant issue. So by actually trying to mitigate these issues early on, then we will prevent homelessness. We will stop that happening.
Yeah, and actually I'm very struck with the crossover between the multiple and the correlated factors that exist there, and in my own, in terms of social work, that what is known within social work, the toxic trio of addiction, domestic violence and mental health. And you could extrapolate from that, and if you can start to address those fundamental issues and provide the services, as you say, you'll have an impact on housing. Go ahead, Jim.
Sure, just add to that. What we're seeing is now generational homelessness. So we're seeing individuals who have experienced these really difficult life events becoming homeless more often, more likely to sleep on the streets. So it's not a one-off instance, it tends to be recurring. And when you look at the current stats, we have over 62,500 people who are legally homeless now. Around 19,657 of whom are under 18. So we have a third of our homeless population now are young people. And we know that unless we intervene early, they're going to bounce around the system.
I think it's a really good window into the issue of transgenerational trauma and the impact of the conflict here, I have to say. And I'm struck by that around there has been recent progress around the 1.24% uplift in recognising additional need here in terms of the block grant. However, none of that takes account of the fact that 0.24 was missing for so many years, and the transgenerational going back even beyond that. So I think there's huge issues for us to grapple with there. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to come to members now. I'm coming to our Deputy Chair, first of all, Cathy, and then Kelly.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks, guys, for your presentation. Honestly, I think I could talk to you all day about it. I found it really fascinating. The point around early intervention has already been made, but I suppose for me specifically, I have a really keen interest in terms of education and that link. And we see study after study that shows us about educational underachievement and those in areas of disadvantage, and particularly academic selection, and how all of that marries together and can have that impact. We also now have a huge crisis when it comes to our special educational needs and those children's needs not being met at the outset, and a huge rise in school non-attendance and emotional-based school non-attendance. And those children, unfortunately, who maybe have parents who can advocate for them, who can fight for a statement of need or whatever that might be, tend to be able to progress. But unfortunately, we're seeing this cycle. What's your view on it and that kind of link with education and how we ensure, we often hear this term early intervention when it comes to department and officials and things like that. What does that really, really mean at the core of it?
I'm on a school board of governors at a primary school, and I hear from the teachers that they can spot the kids who are in trouble. They know who they are. but they also say they don't know where to go with it. They can report it through Gateway, they can report it to social services, but there doesn't seem to be an acceptance within education or health that this is an issue. About 5 years ago, probably a bit more, the Interdepartmental Action Group had decided that education was going to be key, and there would be a piece of work done to integrate as part of the curriculum a study on homelessness. So teaching young people the signs of homelessness, the avenues where they can get help and support, and when it would be appropriate to raise the issues. That was dropped. And it was dropped because the education Department of Education just said, we don't want to do this, we don't have the bandwidth to do it, which was really unfortunate, because that's where you see young people. You see them in other places, you see them in doctors' surgeries, you see them in solicitors, you see with the police. There's a whole variety of instances where we see these young people and the issues, but we have no throughput, which reinforces the point that it's not just the housing issue. The housing issue is the last resort. It's an education issue, it's a justice issue, it's a health issue, and getting traction on that is incredibly difficult. But it was hugely disappointing because I think we missed a real opportunity with with education to do something in the classroom with young people.
Just to add to that as well, I suppose one of the real frustrating things as well is around RSE being taught in schools as well, relationship and sex education, and teaching children the signs of consent and different things like that, which we know very often leads to trauma, which leads on to all of these other impacts that can happen. And unfortunately we're caught in a battle with that at the minute with the Department of Education, and that not being key either. The other thing just then, I suppose I have another interest in is around that kind of early years piece. And like you say, there are teachers out there, even childcare providers, who are very aware that there are issues. What needs to change there? There are certain providers, they can't report anywhere. There's a blockage put up to educational psychologists or social workers and all of those things. What needs to be done there to make sure that there's protection or early intervention at that very, very early stage as well?
I think there needs to be a greater acceptance that homelessness is a real thing, and it's caused by a lack of support, a lack of intervention. I think that there needs to be an acceptance within departments that there needs to be throughput here, and there needs to be that willingness to accept some of the responsibility of this issue, and there needs to be resources put into avenues where teachers, for example, can report this through or ask for support. That's not there because we don't have the thinking on it, because everything tends to be reactive rather than proactive. And the point that I made at the PSE was, we tend to talk about homelessness as a supporting people issue, and I listened really carefully to the last session. It's not. It's much wider than that. It's a huge burden on justice, our prison service, on our policing. It's a huge burden in our health and our, I'm on the board of the ambulance service, and I know the drain on that too. But what we do is we spend loads of money just dealing with it instead of stepping back and looking, well, what's the total cost? And if we had a number on that cost, let's see how we could do that differently. So it's not necessarily about pumping more money at it. It's about looking at how we integrate services with the view of actually getting the best bang for the buck. So we know the cost of lots of things, but we don't know the value of it. And I think it needs a fundamental shift in how we address all of this stuff.
And the reality is we have the Children's Services Cooperation Act there in place, but it's not being implemented, it's not being used. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Cathy. Kelly?
Hi guys. You're preaching to the converted when you're talking to me, but what gets me the most is the fact that, as you say, we have almost 20,000 people under the age of 18 who are sitting with full duty, homelessness. That's disgusting. And we're supposed to be a modern Northern Ireland. My issues are about, we'll talk about care leavers first, and I know that there's different programmes coming through. I know that we've adopted through the gate approach with people leaving the justice, coming out of prison, where they're approached early on and plans are put in place of what's going to happen after they leave. With care leavers, it just gets me. They know exactly when these children are going to be leaving care homes, and whether that's 16 or 18, we know that this is happening. But there doesn't seem to be plans in place. You talked about in your report there that in 24-25, 123 care leavers presented to the Housing Executive. They should have already had places set out, and for whatever reason that hasn't worked. So there's something in our system there that is failing these young children, and far too many of them are in temporary accommodation, which, having spoke to some of the young people who were care users or were in care homes, that temporary accommodation is really not suitable for anybody's young person to be in. They're seeing and being faced with situations that are horrendous. So all credit to the work that you guys are doing. But one thing that interested me was the fact that in 4.2 in your paper, you talked about Simon Community having to find £300,000 to support a government programme. So what we're doing, are you saying to us that in order to deliver the programme, looking particularly at young people, that you're having to find over £250,000 per year to fund government programmes?
Yes, we do. We have to make subventions in what is effectively the discharge of statutory services. We have to do that. I think the joy of charities when they get money in, they should be able to fund the things that aren't covered by statutory services. But increasingly we and others, and you'd heard Kevin touch upon this, we have to put money into prop services up. And we have to make a choice between what's essential and what's necessary. And that's a really difficult balance. And it grates because what we hear is the public line, and to be fair, they're quite public about it, but the Housing Executive were saying it costs 7 times more to have people in unregulated placements, i.e. no support, than it does to have in the not-for-profit making sector. It really grates, to be quite honest with you, because we are making and affecting huge savings. And there's almost this line, and it's certainly one in the past from the department, you should be damn lucky you're getting this money. They don't fund us to keep us alive, they fund us to provide what is a legal service on behalf of others, and if we are not able to do that, the cost will rocket.
Yeah.
And again, it's about, I think, the race to the bottom. It's about getting it done as cheaply as you possibly can, and it's not working in a way that it should.
The all-party group on homelessness that I chair and the chair is vice chair of, we heard from that cross-departmental homelessness group about what each department is doing, and we've heard from Justice, we've heard from Health now. What was very concerning about education was the training or the information about homelessness was being provided to young people, but not actually dealing with young people's concerns about them being homeless. And they talked about newcomers, and having access on a sporadic basis, to be honest, to home to school transport. One of the things that is missing in all of this is preparing our young people and helping them understand what the situation is. And let's face it, a lot of those young people already know the difficulties of what the situation is. Do you think that we should be asking then in the curriculum review that's coming up that I can't remember the name of it, Living for Life and whatever it's called, should include real life understanding of housing after they leave their parents' home or after they leave care or whatever, and give those young people a foundation in that basic?
Yeah, 100%. We are just about to publish a report at the end of January in partnership with the Northern Ireland Youth Forum and the Housing Executive that spoke to nearly 70 young people across Northern Ireland experiencing homelessness, specifically on the Youth Homelessness Action Plan, but around other areas that were really relevant to them in their homelessness journey. One of the big takeaways is education. One of the big takeaways is not understanding what homelessness was, what housing was, independent skills. Really big ask around, you don't know you need to ask for help until you're in the situation. And then when you're in the situation, you don't know who to ask for help. So there was a big ask from young people to actually put that into the school curriculum, how to get help. What happens if there's a housing issue? What happens if your family's worried about paying rent? Do it in a way that's accessible. There's a massive issue around how we communicate to young people and what forms of media we use to communicate and get those messages across. So that came out as well. So yes, young people themselves are saying, please use this opportunity to tell us more, so that when we're facing these issues, we know where to go for help.
And that needs to happen much earlier because, if you wait until somebody's 16 and they've already left home, you're too late then. They may not be in school anymore at that stage, so it needs to be earlier. So.
100%.
The curriculum drives kids towards academic achievement and isn't mindful of the fact that A, not all kids are academically minded, and B, that education should be more than just about getting a GCSE or an A-level. It should be about life skills, and time again we will see people, particularly young people, coming to us who don't have what we accept to be basic life skills. Not being able to wash clothes, not being able to cook a meal, not being able to budget. Those are pretty fundamental things, and why don't they know it? It's not because they're stupid. They've never been shown. They've never been in this place. So I think if you're looking for a broader, curriculum, we need to teach young people how to be resilient. What happens when you have to do this stuff for yourself?
Absolutely.
Because we're doing it as a charity.
And that brings us back into ACEs, because these are ACEs that are showing up. If children and young people do not have the ability, that are experiencing neglect, that are being abused at home, that mum or dad are struggling with alcohol or mental health issues, there's violence in the community that we know that are prevalent in some areas. These are the factors that the curriculum needs to start to address, which is based on our report.
Yeah, and increasingly actually critical thinking is becoming, with AI and development of social media and the toxicity of that, critical thinking is actually a huge issue as well. And also, not only do academic, not the only things that people individually need, but also society needs much more than people with just academic qualifications. So there's a whole subject within that itself. Thank you. Yeah, I have Morris, and then I'll come back to you, Sean. Morris, go ahead.
Chair, thanks very much for your presentation. Lack of social housing has been the theme this morning, and I have always believed that lack of social housing sometimes means young people have to move out of the house, they have to move far away from the family environment. They lost that support of the family network. Should it be mum, dad, granny, granddad, whatever, and that has an adverse effect, moving away from the family home at distance because they can't get a house within the community they were born in. I think it's a massive down. The other side of it is dispensed families into emergency accommodation. The effect that has on children. It's an unstable environment, and you don't know what else is going on in that environment. To give you an example, a couple came into my office several months ago. They had lost their private rented accommodation. They were forced out. They were put into emergency accommodation in Ballymena. The husband worked in Portstewart. The children attended school in Coleraine, and the mother didn't drive. And they were just uprooted, placed in Ballymena. No thought to how does the husband get to work? How does the children get to school? I mean, that's no way to bring up children. It's no way to live. And I don't know, do you get much of that as a feedback?
I mean, I think I'll start with family homelessness. No child should ever experience homelessness. We have a family hostel in West Belfast, and the experience of people before they come through our doors is that of being in bed and breakfasts, in hotels, trying to heat bottles and kettles, not being able to afford food. I mean, one thing that resonated with me, and it's a similar example, somebody that was working had some savings, but actually within a week of staying in a hotel because they were away from schools, or they couldn't even think about a weekly ticket because they didn't know where they were going to be accommodated tomorrow. It costs way more to have way less. And actually any kind of savings people have are gone in an instinct, or are gone in a moment. So we absolutely agree with you, and we hope that actually that looking at obviously we need to buy more affordable homes, but also building on what our colleagues in East Belfast Mission were talking about in relation to community investment in social homes is something that we are doing and looking at the minute, and one of those elements is looking at family homes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just to say, Marcia, I think you're absolutely spot on. We haven't built enough affordable homes. And at the PSE, I give some figures, which I won't go through now, but broadly speaking, we've already added 14,000 new social and affordable homes to the housing stock in the last 23 years, between the housing executives' decline and the lack of investment to scale up, not only to match that decline, but to add more, has left a huge problem. And to bring that to life for you, we did a snapshot last week of the amount of bed space we had available across all of our suite. We've nearly 500 beds, and how many demands that we had, or many asked for accommodation. So we had 13 beds over the course of last week became available. We had 504 requests for accommodation. We could only help 13 people. So, and again, my point is, where are those individuals?
Yeah.
And they're stuck in hotels and
So worrying.
B&Bs and elsewhere, and they're costing tens of millions of pounds.
Yeah, very, very worrying, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Morris. And just picking up on comment there, Jim, you said about the decline of the housing executive, and I know you've called for pause on the right to buy scheme. How damaging is this scheme in terms of reducing the supply of social homes?
It's, I mean, it's absolutely huge. I mean, if you look at the housing executive in 2002, which wasn't that long ago, doesn't feel that long ago, it had 110,000 homes.
Yeah.
It now has 83,000 homes and declining. If you look at the Housing Association moving back then at 20,000 homes, it now has 61. The net effect is 14,000 extra homes over 23 years. You can't cope with that. Never mind all of the other issues that we have and all of the other shocks, including poverty and COVID and all those things. It's an increase in population anyway. We weren't building enough for the people that we should have seen and planned for, never mind overlay it with everything else, which requires us to have, and I hate to be defeatist because actually we could deal with this differently. We could look at how the housing executive could borrow. We could look at land price capping and use of public land. We could look at retrofitting even for a medium term on empty buildings. We could look at modular. The problem is we do the same thing here over and over again and expect a different result, and then we all kind of look at why it doesn't happen. We've started our own housing venture. And colleagues at East Belfast Mission nodded to that. We'll do more. We could deal with this problem if there was a real will and a determination to deal with it, and I think we have to now. We don't have any choice.
Thank you. Sharon?
Yeah, and just while I have an opportunity, I just want to say thank you so much and pay tribute to your incredible staff in Ballymena. Particularly, I've worked really hard alongside them. In fact, just last week, one of your tenants who's moving into one of the properties that you've purchased, we've been working alongside to support, and it is just incredible, especially when Simon is the only adult place of sanctuary they've known, and they're going into their first home. So just a huge tribute. And Karen, I was there at the launch, and just like some of the figures are just shocking. They really are. There's no other way to put it. I have had conversations with people around that, the community and paramilitary violence, and people are going, that's far too high a figure for 2025. There's no way that must be historic or its legacy. But I think it was 36.1% of people experiencing homelessness had been threatened with community or paramilitary violence, and 28.7% have been directly victimised, often alongside the childhood trauma, addiction and mental health. I guess for me, from your research and from your frontline experience, what are we missing here in terms of the support to, or the protections or interventions there that are currently missing for people who are maybe at risk of paramilitary violence or that cohesive or coercive control of paramilitaries in our societies? And is it a big problem in 2025 in your research findings?
Okay, so yes, I mean the research findings is saying that violence in childhood, so the young people in this study were born after the Good Friday Agreement, and still collective violence was one of their top issues in childhood. We see that violence then continues throughout the life course for people in hostels, with the figures that you have given around adults. So you've experienced in childhood, alongside domestic violence, etc., and then now you're experiencing it in adulthood as well. And I don't know if we've had enough conversations around it. I don't know if we have actually, I mean, our housing system is still segregated. Our school system is still segregated. We've seen Queen's do some work in 2018 around vulnerability of young people in relation to community and paramilitary violence. But are we asking the right questions? Are we trying to uncover the root causes and the issues and find out why people are more vulnerable than others? Is it worthy of further conversation? I mean, phase 2 of our study actually looks at specific typologies of homelessness and how all these factors kind of interlink in relation to people's journeys. So that might be an opportunity for us to maybe expand on some of these conversations. If you look at the conflict-related adversity, a third of people lost their homes in childhood because of collective violence. And half of these guys were born after the Good Friday Agreement. So there is a conversation and more evidence that we need to explore in relation to this impact in homelessness, this experience and homelessness. I think it's still part of our society. It affects people across Northern Ireland.
I'm really glad to hear that in phase 2 that is something that might be dealt in deeper. But again, thank you so much for the research that you've done.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And again, that's been another very, very insightful look from a different perspective and a really important perspective into homelessness, the causes and the potential solutions. If we understand the causes, we can start to derive the solutions. So thank you, both of yourselves. That's been really helpful, Jim and Karen. I appreciate your input there today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, members, so that concludes the 3 panels in relation to housing and homelessness. I actually think, and I want to first of all thank the clerk and her team for pulling those panels together. I think they were really, really valuable. They really added a lot to our understanding and our knowledge. My next sentence is probably going to underline the fact that no good deed goes unpunished, because I actually think, looking at what we have heard this morning, there's actually a mini report potentially could be drawn from what we've heard today. And if members were content, I think we should ask the clerk to maybe look at that. And we can then, once we have the report drawn up, we can see do we bring that into the Assembly via a motion or something like that. But I think this needs to go to all departments. It's key, we've heard it throughout today, the need to work better together across departments. The executive and all the departments, I think, is fundamental to all of this. So if members are agreed with that, and then I can pick up on any other actions that members think, but we've already highlighted a number of things. I think actually we should draw it all into one paper, to be honest.
Chair, could I ask as well, in the Simon Communities paper under 4.6, it talks about a strategic needs assessment was conducted by the Housing Executive back in 2020. You know, things have changed since then. It's got a lot worse. We should be asking, is that being reviewed again? Is that going to be done again? I think that, I know it comes from outside of this committee, but the all-party group did ask that interdepartmental homelessness action group, whatever it's called, what each department is doing with regards to homelessness, and it did seem a bit piecemeal. Some of it's joined up, but not all of it, and especially when we've heard today that children are able to be identified so young, and yet we're still leaving them at the age of 16 and 17 with no homes. You know, that's wrong. Yeah,
members content, we inquire in relation to that, or ask in relation to that.
Housing executive?
Yeah.
Strategic needs.
Are they going to review their 2020 strategic needs assessment, update it?
Members content with that action?
But yes, I think a report, Chair, is absolutely, perfect.
Okay, members, so thank you, Clerk. You content with the information there, and you can go back to say in relation to how we...
Time frame for the report and a draft motion for plenary, well, we can try and work on that over the recess period with the view to looking at it in January.
Okay, thank you, Clerk, and thank you, members. So moving on then, members, to agenda item 13, Sign Language Bill, committee deliberations on the clauses of the bill. So as we completed our informal deliberations of the Sign Language Bill at our additional meeting, which we held on Tuesday, and I thank members for their commitment and attendance there, we got a really good piece of work done, I think. So in relation to this agenda item then, those have been dealt with for this week. The committee team have also sent the committee's requests for amendments to the department in the hope that we can get the complete feedback at next week's committee meeting. So thank you for that, members. Agenda item 14 is the forward work programme, a copy of which is starts at page 376. Do members have any comments, or are you content to note the forward work programme?
Content.
Content, thank you, members. Agenda item 15, just before I go to agenda item 15, I actually missed out on apologies, but we had received an apology from Mark.
Yes, we did.
Dorkin. Yeah, so just record that in the minutes, please. Moving then to agenda item 15, any other business. Do members have any other business they wish to raise today? And remind members that we're taking the tour now over across the way. And agenda item 16 then is date, time and location of the next meeting. Members, our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday 11th of December 2025 in room 29 Parliament Buildings. Thank you all very much, and see you then, and the meeting is now adjourned.